Welcome to the November 2022 update on the performance of my solar array. So, some interesting news for you this month. The supply voltage coming from the grid is spiking at 267 volts, and that is causing us a few issues. So, stay tuned and I'll tell you all about it. First of all, the disclaimer, please pause and read. I'm not an expert, I'm just sharing this for informational purposes only. Right, let's get into this grid issue. So, I noticed that the battery from Give Energy wasn't working as expected. And like I keep telling you, there always seems to be something from Give Energy which is causing me a problem. But to be fair, this time it's not their fault. It seems to be the grid. So what happened is I browsed the app and I happened to notice that even though my battery had about 40% charge, it wasn't discharging and I was pulling power from the grid and therefore paying the peak time price. So I called Give Energy because I noticed this happened a few times. And I had a chat with them to try and figure out what the issue is. And they did some kind of rummaging through all my data and came back to tell me that there is a grid supply voltage problem. And this has been happening all the way since last year, basically since I got the system installed. Now, I do happen to notice these error messages popping up from time to time when I look through all the logs, but I mean, I don't notice a problem, so I just carry on. But the voltage appears to have been getting to such a point now that it's tripping out the inverter for quite a long time. So let me explain to you how it works. So first of all, you're probably used to the fact that most gadgets in the UK are designed to work on 230 volts. That is supposed to be our incoming voltage supply. It used to be way back when at 240 volts, but I think we normalised with the EU. That's why it's now 230 volts. Now my DNO, the district network operator, these are the people who supply electricity. In my part of London, it is UK Power Networks. And Give Energy told me to give them a call because this is a problem they need to resolve. So they aim to pump 242 volts to your house, slightly above what most of your gadgets require. And the reason for this is because the further away you are from the substation, the more the voltage drops on the line. So they aim to produce 242. Those houses closer to the substation probably get something higher. Those a bit further away probably get something a bit lower, the average being 242. Now, voltage is not constant, it fluctuates. So they have a range, a tolerance. They go plus 10% and minus 6% from the 230 mark. So that means as long as the voltage that they supply is within, it's about 210 volts off the top of my head roughly, or 215 volts to 253 volts, then everything is okay in their world. If you go beyond and above 253 volts, then they're going to sit up and take attention. So let's look at the chart that you have here on the screen. The green line at the very bottom, this is 242 volts. This is what they say that they are supplying to all of their houses. The blue line at the top, this is 257 volts. This is when the Give Energy inverter cuts out for safety reasons. And the baseline of this chart is 230 volts. That's what your whole house should be consuming or is expecting to receive. So you can see on this chart the crazy zigzag red line is the actual grid supply voltage. Now you can see on this chart that apart from at 6 p.m, at all times we are receiving above 242 volts. Most of the time we're fluctuating between that and the 257. But you can see between 9 a.m. and 1:30, we were pushing way past the 257 and we've actually spiked at 267 or 268 volts, right? And the Give Energy inverters basically cut out during this period. And that's why we were pulling power from the grid even though the battery had about 40% in there. This is what got my attention and this is why. So I discovered that Give Energy have got data going back a whole year. So as I browsed through other days, I discovered a matching story. There seems to be a spike kind of overnight, midnight-ish, where we go high on the voltage, and again around lunchtime-ish. That seems to be the pattern. It's not there every day, but that's what I notice. This particular day, the 3rd of December, is when I figured out there's something wrong, and this is what the chart looks like. So something particularly bad was happening during this window, and I don't know what. Now, this is all Give Energy data, right? So I wanted to try and figure out, well, is this correct? Maybe Give Energy are wrong. So there is a way, if you're a competent person, to use a multimeter and test an electricity socket to see what voltage you're actually getting. So I got a multimeter, which I have anyway, put it into a socket and tested the voltage. And at that moment, I got a reading of 247. When I checked a different socket, I got a reading of 250. And when I compare the numbers to Give Energy at the same time frame, it matched up. So I know that these readings from Give Energy are pretty accurate. So I spoke to the DNO. They have taken a report. It's got their attention. They plan to send out an engineer to the property to come and investigate. This was on Saturday. Today I'm recording this on Monday, and still nobody has come out. I've called them back, and they said they are treating it with priority, but I still haven't heard from them. So we'll see. Now, why is any of this important? Well, the gadgets that you have in your house are expecting to receive 230 volts, and usually they can have a tolerance of plus or minus 10%. Now, in my example, the voltage I'm receiving is beyond the 10%. We are at 15 to 20%. And that's the point where some of these gadgets will start to burn out. They'll overheat, circuits will fry, transistors will blow, things like that. So it can damage some of your equipment. Light bulbs are the most common thing to go where they just get too hot, like filament bulbs will just blow at this kind of voltage. So it is important to do something about this because it can cause damage. Now, I have a single phase supply. As you know, that supply comes in 3 phases, so probably my neighbour is on a different phase, so they may not be experiencing the same problem. But there will be people, for example, every third house or something, whoever's on the same phase as me, who could be having, equivalent voltage problems. So it's we need to get this sorted because this is kind of dangerous and it's quite high. The products that we have in our house are not designed to run at this voltage. Now, what can they do about it? The grid can go to their substation and they can step the voltage down. That is technically possible. Of course, if they step it down to get mine right, they could be stepping it down too far and then other people have too low a voltage. So I don't know how the grid's going to solve the problem. That is for them to figure out, right? But what I can say is that the voltage I'm receiving is outside of their own tolerance, their own safety tolerance, and it's outside whatever the government has prescribed that they should be providing. So they have to do something about this. Now, when I spoke to them on the phone, it didn't sound too urgent to them, and they were like, well, we have up to 6 months to do something about this. That's quite concerning to me because I don't think we want to wait 6 months to solve this problem, especially when it's tripping out the Give Energy system and then I end up not taking advantage of all the benefits of that equipment. So I'll give them a few days, I'll keep chasing them, I'll see what happens. There is an alternative. I can purchase a step-down transformer and I can arrange for an electrician to install it between my meter and my consumer unit. And the cheapest one will just step down your voltage by 10%, and that costs about £375 just for the gadget plus installation. A more expensive one, which will give you a few options, I think, to step it down by 8%, 10% and 15%, whichever one you happen to want. That gadget costs about £1,000 plus installation. So we'll see, it's not money I really want to be wasting on this when it's clear from this data that the problem is the grid and not me. How the grid manages to solve the problem for everybody is their problem. So let's wait and see, but I wanted to share this with you because it's interesting and it matters. And here's a different chart for you to look at on supply voltage. I wish there was a way from Give Energy to kind of show you more days worth of data all in one go, but it doesn't let me do that. So here's a snapshot of one day, which was particularly crazy, but the pattern is pretty consistent on most days. And the key message here is that the voltage they aim to be supplying is nowhere near what I'm getting anyway. It's much higher, and it's really bordering their own safety limits, and you can, for most of the time, and going above it some of the time. Let's get back to the normal metrics that you're used to then. So for the month of November, the solar array produced 143.3 kilowatts of electricity. We exported 1.6 kilowatts according to Enphase, but according to Octopus, we exported 8 kilowatts. And we imported 440.8 kilowatts, meaning our house consumed 582.5 in total. You can see from the graph that on average we consume about 20 kilowatts a day, and the solar power contribution seems to be hovering around the 5 kilowatt mark roughly every day. So we're not getting anywhere near as much. Our energy independence for the whole month was only 24%. And if you look over on the right, the panels on the front of our house are making the biggest contribution. They're in that kind of royal blue kind of colour. And at the very bottom, the dark blue, almost black coloured panels are the west elevation of our house, which is slightly northwest, and therefore it's really not doing much. So be it. You know, it's producing 36 kilowatts roughly in the whole month, which is almost 2 days worth of electricity for us. So it's better than nothing. But it really starts to help top up the numbers when we get to the summer months. All right, best and worst days. So the best day was the 4th of November. We produced 12.3 kilowatts. If you look at the graph, we were charging the battery up overnight, and then from 4:30 until about 8 a.m. when the sun comes up, the battery is discharging, which means we have no draw from the grid. And then we've got sunshine, we're powering our house and we're charging up the battery. And we've got a nice looking bell curve there. And then from about 3-4 p.m. when it starts to get a bit darker, the solar power tails off, the battery kicks in. We've got a bit of noise in the system, so we might be running the kettle or something around then. Something weird around 6 o'clock. So either we've got two high-powered devices running, like, I don't know, the oven and the microwave or something, or we were having this problem with the grid voltage and the battery stops discharging and we're pulling everything from the grid. I'm not sure. But anyway, after about 7 p.m, we're back to drawing power from the grid and you don't see anything else on this chart. Just to point out that I think we were doing this from October, but I have configured the battery to fully charge or charge as much as it can every day on the Octopus Go tariff, because we're definitely not producing enough solar to meet our need, and so we need to pull power from the grid, and therefore I'd rather pull that when the rate is cheap, which is overnight. So I get the battery to charge up as much as I can, and then that cheap electricity is discharging during the day versus me purchasing expensive electricity. Of course, if I run out of power in the battery, then the rest of it's going to come at the peak rate. The other thing I've done from December onwards is I've configured the eddy to heat our hot water as well overnight on the Octopus Go tariff. This is because what I didn't realise is the price of gas has increased, and it happened last month and I didn't pick up on it. We're on a variable tariff and they've ramped up the prices, and now a unit of gas costs more than a unit of electricity. So it makes sense as much as possible for me to divert more gas usage into electricity. So the only thing I can control really is hot water. So I'm getting the hot water to heat up overnight, and then that saves me a bit of money on gas. So we'll see what happens next month. Okay, coming back to the chart on the right then, the worst day in November was the 21st of November, only 0.6 kilowatts produced. Again, you can see the battery charging overnight. It keeps us going in the early hours, and then during the day there's so little solar power that the battery is basically discharging, and then we get to about 4-5 p.m. maybe we have the oven running again, and we get to about 8 p.m. and the battery's dead, and the rest of the power we need has to come from the grid. Looking at the performance of all of the panels together, so I've run out of space on the slide, but what I've done is plonked the November chart over here in the middle, so hopefully you can see what each panel is producing each month using this diagram. Okay, moving on, household electricity consumption. So for the month of November, we pulled 448 kilowatts from the grid. We used 128 kilowatts of solar power. We put 8 kilowatts into the eddy, and that meant we consumed a total of 583 kilowatts. We did not put any electricity into the car, and that is because I have a bit of credit from the car manufacturer to use on public charging points, which expires in January. So I am actively using the public charging points to charge up the car. Even though it costs a lot more, it's free credit, which will otherwise expire. So that's why you don't see any slivers on this chart relating to the EV consumption for the month of November. So if I compare our consumption to last year, November 21, we used 656 kilowatts. versus the 583, so we're down about 80 kilowatts, which is good. And I remember last year we had a electric heater burning electricity, so that's why it was a bit high. If we go back to November 2020, then we used 618 kilowatts. So again, we're down about 40, which is good. I wouldn't say apart from last year we're doing anything dramatic. I think that's just noise in the system, 40 kilowatts here or there in terms of electricity. So our usage is basically consistent. That's the message. If I talk about gas consumption, so November here in London area in the UK has been particularly cold, and so we have used a load of gas, majority of which is going towards heating our home. So we have two gas supplies, 1882 kilowatts on the first and 2595 on the second, meaning the grand total is 4484 kilowatts of gas used in 1 month, right? Compared to November 21, we only used 2556. If I remember, it was very mild last autumn, winter, so the comparable's a lot lower. If we go to November 2020, we were using 3959, so we're in the same ballpark as we are now. I really think it's just due to the outside temperature. Now, the shocking news is this. That 4,495 kilowatts of gas that we used equates to £477 of gas in 1 month, in one calendar month. That is an insane number. Now, I know we use a bit more energy than the average household, but this has really got my attention, because how can you be paying £500 a month on gas all the way through the winter? If we rewind a year, the average house used to be paying about £1,500 for gas and electricity. Now I'm going to be spending that kind of money just in the winter. So this is nuts. What I did discover is we don't have cavity wall insulation in part of our house. Now, there's a bit of a story here. A few years ago, somebody came knocking on the door saying that they're checking for cavity wall installation. Would we like it done? Because there's a government grant and they'll get it all sorted out for free, part of the energy company. And we said, yep, please go ahead. And they, drilled a hole, stuck a boroscope in, and they said to us that we do already have cavity wall insulation. So that was the end of that. I didn't think anything of it. And then, in recent weeks, I've been thinking about this. The house that we live in was built in the 1930s, so no cavity wall insulation was there. We've owned this house for a very long time, and as far as I can remember, I've never ever seen cavity wall insulation go in, retrofitted. But there's an easy way to tell. They drill holes every third or fourth brick, so I should be able to see drill holes in the brick line and covered up in a slightly different coloured cement. Well, I had a good look around and I couldn't see that. So I called out another company. I asked them to drill a hole, and they did, and the guy showed me on his app that there's fresh air in there. There's cobwebs. His boroscope's got all light on it, so you could see. So we don't have cavity wall insulation. Now, the old part of our house doesn't. The new part of our house, he drilled a couple of holes there, and we do have cavity wall insulation installed when we built the new part of our house. So a chunk of it's missing. We therefore need to get it done, which I'm looking into. Now, unfortunately, a few years ago, this first person who came around has made a mistake and told us that we did have it when we didn't. Now, at that time, we could have got the cavity wall insulation installed for free. But now the government grant has run out and we have to pay for it. There is a grant available for those of you who are on low income. And low income is basically you're on benefits. If you're not on benefits, then you're not eligible. That's the long and the short of it. You can look it up properly online if you want. There is a new government grant which comes out in the spring, kind of after you need it, which will get you free cavity wall insulation. They're basically creating a new criteria that it's eligible to those people who are not just on low income, but more people. But the way they assess this is based on the council tax band for your house. So, although we're not millionaires, the council tax band of our house is such that we're still not eligible for this new government grant, which is not out yet. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there, and it gets really confusing about all the different grants they've got and the eligibility criteria, because they don't make it clear, and they just keep on inventing new grants, and one government department runs one, another one runs another. They don't put this all in one place and think of it as the end user, saying, I don't really care what the grant is. My question is, do I get any free money, yes or no? I couldn't care less on what grant it's coming from. That's the government's issue to, what bucket of money they're using up. So I emailed, an email address which administers this stuff probably a couple of weeks ago, and no response. So I could sit around waiting for a government grant, but from what I can figure out, we're not going to be eligible for it anyway. And by the time I wait, I'll have spent even more money paying for gas because we don't seem to have cavity wall insulation. Instead, what I did is I just called a private company. They came out within a couple of days, had a look around, said, "Yep, we need it," gave me a quote, and they're ready to come and install cavity wall insulation pretty quick. So we're going to be getting that done because I think it's going to make a difference on this. So that's just an FYI for you. Our gas bill is high. I'm shocked. £500 in 1 month is ridiculous. All the money that we're managing to save by having solar panels and everything is getting completely destroyed by the cost of gas and the fact that our house is not as energy efficient as it could have been. If I talk about electricity for a moment, £57 for a month is quite cheap when we have used 600 kilowatts. And a different page of this bill shows me that about £25-26 was the cost of electricity based on the off-peak rate. So I'm pulling this overnight on the Octopus Go tariff. The other £25-26 of this bill was based on the peak time rate. So I'm pulling electricity during the day. So it's making quite a substantial difference because roughly, 85-90% of all the electricity that we used was during the off-peak rate in the month of November. So it's quite an interesting metric to show just how much cheaper we're managing to get all of this power by doing that. And just to underline how useless the SEG tariff is, for the 8 kilowatts that I exported, they paid me 33 pence. So I keep on harping on about the fact that exporting electricity is the last thing you want to do, and this is why, right? Try and consume it wherever you can in your house first before giving it back to the grid. And finally, in the UK, for the winter months, for 6 months, the government are giving us a rebate of £66 a month as a contribution towards our ridiculous energy bills. So you can see the line item credited on the 2nd or 3rd of every month over there. So this is our bill, and this is for 1 calendar month. It is absolutely crazy, which is why I'm trying to do something about it. Okay, so if, like me, you guys are on a variable tariff for your gas or your electricity, and maybe you didn't notice last month that the price had gone up, a bit like me, and you want to consider locking it in, if you do feel like switching to Octopus, they will give both you and me a £50 credit as a thank you for switching. You can use the link that you see there on the screen to type it into your browser, and you will get the £50 credit applied to whatever tariff you choose from. If you're a business customer, it's actually £100 each. But if you choose to phone them up and do your switch, then you can quote the reference number that you see on the bottom line, and they will still be able to apply the credit for you. Thank you for those of you who have been signing up and using the link. I really appreciate it. I see them coming through on my account. All right, let's move forward. So, installer estimate versus reality, right? Why do I care? Because if the installer's estimate is wrong, then your payback period forecast changes. Now, this information tells me that the installer's estimates are wildly conservative, and the reality is that you're going to pay this thing back a lot quicker. So let's explain the charts. The one on the left, this is a ratio between how much power the system produced versus how much I consumed. So the more I consume and not give back to the grid, the more I'm finding a way to save. So for the month of November, even though our production was quite low, I have managed to consume 99% of everything we produced. This is perfect. This is the goal. And this is why I got the second battery, to start taking chunks off this and use up more of what we're making. Looking at the right-hand side, the installer thought we would produce 4,916 kilowatts in 12 months. We have now produced 6,097 kilowatts. We're about 2 or 3 weeks over the 12 months now, so I'll reset this chart maybe after December's data, so we start the year fresh. I'll have a think about how to do it. So the metrics aren't quite right, but you can see that we're flatlining now anyway. So anyway, we've managed to produce about 124% of what the installer thought. So that's good. And the installer thought we would consume half of what we produce, but you can see that we're consuming 234% of what they thought. Right? they thought we would use up this much. We're actually all the way up here, this green bar, which is 234%. Overall, 97% efficiency in terms of what we're consuming. So we're blowing the installer estimate out of the water, and in my case they gave me an average of 18 years to pay back the system, and if we're beating it by more than double, it underlines that my forecast of payback is around about the 8 to 11 year mark, and that sounds about right based on these metrics, right? That's why I'm showing you this. That's why it's important to keep in mind that the installer estimates are going to be conservative. When you get yours and you think, oh, to pay £5,000 and take 18 years to pay back, I'd rather not do it, really your payback is going to be a lot quicker. Moving on, peak power, nothing exciting to tell you here really. We peaked at about 2.2 kilowatts on some of the days. We've averaged a measly 1.4 kilowatts, which is comparable to the November of last year. And the correlation with temperature still doesn't mean anything to me. So we can move on. Energy independence, again, only 24% for the month of November. Now, because I've programmed the battery to charge up at 12:30 to 4:30 every night, it means that I've weighed down my energy independence score right from the beginning of every day. But anyway, that's what it is. Moving forward, the solar payback curve. So let's talk about the metrics. So first of all, let me talk about the chart in the background. The gold line up here near the top is the capital expenditure. The green line at the bottom is the sum of all the different savings that we've got. The aim of the game is to get the green line to catch up and overtake the gold line. So you can see that in 1 year we've made progress, but we've still got some time to go. Okay, let's read out the numbers that you see here at the top. Capital expenditure hasn't changed, £21,616. Savings pure on electricity purely from solar power, £1,635, 59 pence. Savings on diesel by not driving my car around, £1,276, 43 pence. Remember that needs to be offset by the cost of charging the electric car instead. Savings from the eddy, £58 and 50 pence. Now for the month of December, so you'll see this in next month's update, I've programmed the eddy to start heating water overnight on the Octopus Go tariff because the cost of gas is now more expensive than the cost of cheap electricity. So I'm putting my eddy to work to heat hot water, and that will reduce the amount of gas that we're consuming. It's not going to make much of a dent because the majority of gas is actually spent heating your home, and there's not much I can do about that because if it's all gas powered central heating. I could plug in a bunch of electric heaters, whatever we've got available, but we don't really want heat in the middle of the night. We want it during mornings and daytime kind of thing. So we'll overheat the house over the night. You won't be able to sleep properly. So I don't know if that's a solution for me. Going forward, SEG savings, only £5 earned by selling the electricity back to the grid. This is a new box I introduced last month, so the savings from Octopus by having an Octopus Go tariff. So what I mean here is I'm charging the battery on the cheap rate and discharging it when I would otherwise have had to buy expensive electricity. So if I add up how much I've saved by doing that, it's £235, 52 pence in total. The cost of charging the car is £165. So I am using the public charging network at the moment because I have some credit to burn. So I am looking for the cheapest chargers on the public charging network to get it to stretch as much as possible, but that's why that cost is creeping up, even though we're not charging at home. So that takes the OPEX savings, if you add up all these boxes over here minus the EV charging, to £3,045 and 81 pence total. That leaves us a balance of 18,570 to pay back. That means we've paid back 14%, had the system for over a year, and the forecast to break even is 70.5 years, which is really, really good. Now, this has still dropped surprisingly, and the reason being is I found that there was a mistake in my calculations here last month because of this new Octopus savings box. I hadn't got the formulas to update properly. So I've corrected it, and that's why I've highlighted a couple of these boxes in red just to draw your attention to this, a small correction on last month's number. But let's read out the numbers for November. So the array produced 143.3 kilowatts. We exported 8 kilowatts back to the grid, which means we managed to consume in the house 135 kilowatts of what we produced. The Enphase system says that we imported 440 from the grid. Octopus says we imported 441. so pretty accurate. In terms of consumption, overall we consumed 582 kilowatts. 8 of that was by the eddy, none of it was by the EV, and 127 of those kilowatts was from solar power. In terms of gas, the gas consumption was 4,484 kilowatts, 8 of which was from the eddy. So if you take that away, the house used 4,476.5 kilowatts. Capex has stayed the same, 21,616. The rate of gas has changed, so even though I've updated it this month, it did actually kick in last month, and I didn't notice. So it's gone from 7.34 pence to 10.31 pence per kilowatt. Okay, the peak time electricity rate is 30.83 pence. The off-peak electricity is 7.5 pence, and the SEG tariff for exporting is 4.1 pence. So with this change, so if you see previously the cost of electricity off-peak and the cost of gas off-peak was almost the same. Gas was a fraction cheaper. So that's why I was letting my gas supply, my boiler, do the work to heat hot water. I know some of you will tell me that it's probably still more efficient to have used electricity because of losses in the system. I do agree with that. But, this is a learning curve for me as well. But now it's very clearly 3 pence more expensive per unit of gas compared to electricity. So now I'm playing the game, how can I heat my hot water or heat my home using off-peak electricity, and that will bring the overall energy bill down. Even though it's 3p, I'm sure you've seen from your gas bill, it adds up pretty quickly because you use a lot of kilowatts to heat your home and heat your water. So that's why the eddy from December onwards, you'll see it in next month's update, is running every night to put as many kilowatts as it can into the hot water system. Looking at the OPEX savings then, so from solar alone, £41.71 this month. From the eddy, just 80p. From diesel, £150.40 saved by not purchasing diesel. 33p earned by selling surplus to the grid. £85.92 saved by charging the battery on the Octopus Go tariff versus buying it at peak time. We have spent £55 charging the electric car, and this is at the public charging networks, and that means our total OPEX savings adds up to £223. So it's dramatically less for two reasons. One is we've produced less solar power. Two is the car, basically. We've done fewer miles compared to last month, and I'm paying more for those miles that we've done because I'm burning through credit, which will otherwise expire. Once that credit expires, I'll be back to charging at home all the time on the off-peak rate, which is far cheaper than using the car on the public network. So that means cumulative OPEX savings are now at £3,045 saved in a fraction over 1 year by having this entire system. Okay. We have therefore got £18,570 left to break even. We have paid off 14.1% of our system already. Okay, so it's really good. And that takes the forecasted payback to 7 years and 6 months. Now, because of the mistake in the gas rate, and I had a mistake in the calculation for Octopus savings last month, I have corrected last month's forecasted payback number as well. It was about 8 years and 6 months, I think, or 8 years and 4 months, and it's now 8 years and 1 month for last month, and 7 years and 6 months this month. So I'm still surprised for the month of November it's gone down. I didn't think that would happen. I thought we would kind of match, but this is really, really good news. I think it's continued to go down dramatically because of the price of gas, and we're able to make further savings. Okay, so this was the payback curve. I hope you found this video interesting. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'm still trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber target by the end of this year. So if you are getting value from this, please do press the button. It would really help me out. Otherwise, I will catch you next month and update you on how I got on with the DNO and the problems I'm having there.